Yo, what up, what up? It's K-Nick here.
Bruh.
With the Bozzy. You should be a pop singer.
Or like a children's singer, like kids' YouTube videos.
Like a Blippy? Yeah. You're like Bozzy?
No.
Blippy is creepy. Oh my gosh, Steven, I totally lost my train of thought here. Give me 1 second here. Oh, I have no idea.
And with that, we'll call it to a close, gang.
Ladies and gentlemen,
I don't think it's coming back to you.
we got him.
This is a series for financial advisors. We offer easy to implement marketing and practice management advice. This is the Steven and Kevin Show.
Welcome back, everybody. Episode number 95 of the Steven and Kevin Show. I'm glad to be back with you. Today, a fun topic.
Yeah, today we're going to talk about how to convert a social contact into a business opportunity and how to do it without ruining relationships.
I happen to think this is like some of our most valuable advice.
Oh, then let's not give it away.
Yeah, so for this episode only, it's $9.95. But no, I do. I think it's one of those that's universal. If you're brand new in the business and like you're still farming your natural network, this is valuable. If you're a veteran of all veterans and you've got super wealthy contacts, it's even more valuable.
Yeah, it's one of the most common calls that we get. I mean, if an advisor is interested in our coaching program, Subtle Plug, and they call in and they're asking us questions about it, they usually say, I have some contacts. I have some people that I know, and I'd like to broach the business conversation, but how do I go about doing that?
Yeah. And I think the reason why there are so many questions about this when some other areas are cut and dry is because there's a lot of risk here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we don't want to get hung up on the negative today. We're not going to talk at length today about what could happen if this goes wrong.
Ooh, I think we should.
But yeah, maybe we will. Yeah, but it can go wrong, right?
Yeah.
We've all experienced that, a sales pitch go wrong. So today we'll address, I guess, the good and the bad. We'll talk about some situations that you might often encounter that are ripe for social prospecting.
Yeah.
Maybe, Kevin, let's start by defining what do we mean by social contacts? Like, who's on the list of people that we could be approaching?
Yeah, I think it's anyone that you know socially. It's pretty broad. So it could be a neighbor, it could be your old friend, your old colleague, it could be someone you know from a networking group. And I think a lot of advisors, when we talk about this topic, they immediately go to, oh, social prospecting, what groups do I need to join? That's not always the case, right? It could be someone from your club. It could be from a networking group, absolutely, but it doesn't always have to be like a business networking group, a BNI or something along those lines.
Yeah, to me, I think those often end up on the bottom of the list.
I agree.
Like when we get to, in a typical webinar, we get to the Q&A and somebody's asking questions right out of the gate about what business networking group should I be part of? I'm like, I think we missed the mark today.
Yeah.
Right? Because you've got a much better chance of making good connections and converting business if you're naturally meeting people, not in some kind of a forced arrangement. Plus, you know, depending upon the size client that you're targeting, they're not always going to be at a more business networking type function.
That's true. And yeah, and also a lot of times like guards are up at those events. So people know that they're there to network and there's networking going on and people are selling. And so it feels not as natural as opposed to finding more of an affinity style group. Like a group where I remember an advisor who joined a watch club, right? He was really into watches. He said, I have the cheapest watch at this watch club, but you know.
Timex.
Yeah, exactly. But he said, I really love watches. An advisor I worked with for years prospected through cycling, right? He's really into cycling. That's his thing. And he met a lot of people that way. And it's a matter of converting them, but doing it naturally and building rapport with them first, not just pitching. Right?
Yeah. So, as we get into the beginning part of today's podcast, let's talk first about where you might get involved. And it really is different for everybody. Mm-hmm. But we want some qualifiers to be there. Number one, you want this group to be filled with people who have money.
Has to have an affluent member base.
Right? I mean, otherwise you're there, maybe your prospecting skills are on point, but you're converting people who don't have a need for your services.
Yeah. Second is that it needs to meet regularly, right? It cannot be that we are, meeting once a year. Like that's not enough face time or to really build relationships with people.
And we use the term meet very loosely here. True. It's not like there's a formal meeting. I mean, if you play a lot of tennis, you can be up there 2 or 3 times a week and seeing people that you'd like to have as clients.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of interaction we're talking about. Somewhere that you can go and get a lot of exposure to people, knowing that it's a pretty slow-moving process. If I only see you once a quarter, how quickly can I advance that relationship to a point to where it's natural to talk business?
It's going to take some time. I
It's
mean,
going to take years.
The example I was sharing with you earlier about the advisor who was part of the cycling groups, there's actually a whole Slack group for his cycling club. So he was on Slack constantly with them, just messaging and sending links and sharing ideas. And yeah, so it's not always, I guess to your point, it doesn't always have to be FaceTime. Like it can be just interaction of some sort.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you think about, from the consumer side of things, let's say that you're a member of this cycling group. Would you rather work with a financial advisor who you know really well? You've grinded it out, going up all the hills in town. Like, this person. Mm-hmm. Would you rather work with them or somebody who cold called you,
right,
who found you through some kind of messaging campaign? You don't trust them. You don't know them.
Right. We did some research on, I think one of the biggest hangups with this topic is, some people say, well, I don't work with friends, right? We did some research on that. We asked the affluent, does it hinder your willingness to work with someone based on like if you're friends with them or not? And it was pretty interesting. I think it was around 75% who said that it did not or it enhanced their willingness to work with someone.
Yeah, I think the friend does matter.
Yeah.
Like you can think of friends of yours who you think are great people, you have a good time with them, but you wouldn't give them a dime to manage.
That's a good point.
Right? So I think that part we should be able to get by. Like today, if we say, you know what, for those of you out there who are involved in the community, who've got good contacts and you want to convert them, we can solve for that. Mm-hmm. With the caveat that if you are the class clown or the one that people just don't look at in the highest of regards.
Right.
Like fun to be around, but not necessarily the most trustworthy, then, we may still have a problem. We may still have to work backwards on this one.
Yeah, going back to that stat though, so that would mean that 25% said that it is an issue. It is like a legitimate concern, but that can't be you can't play those odds, right? Like you can't let that get too much into your head because mentally you're not gonna go for it. Right? If you start thinking, gosh, well, Stephen, he probably just doesn't want to work with friends. Like, I'm not going to approach Stephen.
Well, if you have that mentality, you also have a number of other mentalities, and I'll guarantee it. If you're actively thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't approach this person because, people don't like to work with friends, you're probably also the one saying, this person, they probably already have a financial advisor. This person probably doesn't have enough money or has too much money.
This person knows what I do, and they'll come to me when the timing is right. I hear that one all the time. When they're ready, they know what I do, they'll come to me. And just in general, we're going to be waiting a long time if that's the mentality.
Yeah, and if we are in some ways reluctant to prospect, if you're out there and you're thinking, gosh, this is a little scary for me, we'll come up with a lot of excuses why it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Why I don't want to be seen as salesy, why people will think differently of me. But when we speak about social prospecting, if we're to engage an audience on this, we would say right out of the gate, we do this not because we at Oechsli have this passion for social prospecting. We do it because when you study the best in the business, this is part of their game plan.
Yeah.
And guess what? They're not ostracized from the community. People like them. They have friends. Yeah. And so some of that comes down to the techniques that we're going to talk through today of being able to do this with good energy, with a smile, and not being off-putting.
Yeah, we did a focus group. We do a lot of online surveys, obviously, researching affluent investors and advisors. But we did a focus group of advisors, and I remember this was a few years back, and they were saying things like, "Look, all I do is social prospecting. It's everything to my business." Right? There was so many good sound bites out of it, and it was a group that brought in like $42 million in net new assets over a 12-month period. So it's a group worth listening to. Like that was their average each individually. So we know it's done. We know advisors are doing it, and some are doing it successfully. It's just a matter of their approach. And like you said, Stephen, they do it with a twinkle in their eye and a smile.
Yeah. So as we get into this, know that we're going to cover some skill sets today that you'll find some level of comfort in. Like we don't want this to be super salesy. It is totally possible to do this without being salesy, and we will get there. But as we're kind of winding up for that, let's talk about the kinds of people that you should approach. So let's say that I'm involved in a cycling group. Who there is someone that I should approach about doing business, and who there is someone maybe that I should not? Is there a certain number of interactions that are prerequisites? Is there, what is it, Kevin, in your mind?
Three interactions, Stephen. No,
Excellent.
I'm kidding. But that's a question that we get sometimes, and we've heard advisors say that before, right? Like, okay, after my third interaction, that's when I go for it. I'm like, no, that's not it. It's like, it's such an art form, right? And we have to feel like that we built enough rapport with them to a point where when I do broach that subject, it's not totally off-putting. From a coaching standpoint, if I were on a coaching call with an advisor who was saying, hey, I have these contacts and these are the people that I'm thinking about approaching, am I ready to approach them? What I would typically do in that scenario is I would ask the advisor, well, tell me about them. Mm-hmm. Like, tell me, what's their spouse's name? What's their kids' names? What do they do for fun? Where do they go to school? I would just start asking questions, probing questions. And if the advisor really had little to no answers for a lot of those questions, then we're not there yet. Like, there's a little bit of work that needs to be done first.
Yeah, and as we've talked about, people have a lot of options for financial advisors. Most people with money know a lot of financial advisors.
Sure.
So you're not typically going to work with somebody you've just met. I mean, you've got a lot of other people that are in consideration for that. Mm-hmm. So, generally speaking, that's not so much the industry issue. Like,
of knowing when to approach?
I would say the issue across the industry is not jumping the gun and pitching too early, but never doing it at all.
That's it. Yeah.
Like the people who do that stick out to us. Like, we've worked with plenty of them over the years, and they stick out to you. They're memorable characters, and you can bet they go to a function. They've got an absolute pocket full of business cards, and they are throwing them out to anybody who will catch one.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the person who's got their one or two liners. They're hitting up everybody for business.
Right.
And we remember them because they're kind of characters. It's 2% of the industry maybe who just are assertive salespeople. And most everybody else, I mean, it's kind of like you're either wired to be that person or you're not. There's no developing that persona.
Like, I'm not going to turn into that person, right?
Yeah, unless you had some kind of weird mental breakdown, like you're not coming back in a month and being like,
I agree.
Pushy salesperson.
It's usually the person who says, like, gosh, I'm really good at building relationships. I've built a ton of relationships up, but I'm so afraid of ruining these friendships that I'm not going to make that approach.
So our push for many people out there today is, let's work up to 25% more assertiveness. Mm-hmm. Let's add in another, one-liner or two that might make us feel uncomfortable at first, but says to the other person, I have interest in working with you.
Yeah. I agree. I totally agree. And so what we're talking about kind of here initially in these early phases is the mental side of it. Like, this is a mental game. Like, we have to say, you know what, I'm going to be a little bit more assertive. That's okay. Like, a little bit more. I'm not going to get, become another person, right? But also, I'm going to get comfortable with the idea of approaching my social contacts and understanding that I might get rejected, right? I might get some people who just blow me off or not interested. But how we respond in those scenarios is going to make a big difference, right? Like, we're the ones who's going to make it feel salesy or make it feel awkward.
Yeah. So on one hand, you don't want to spend a lot of time envisioning the worst case scenario here because the worst case is unlikely. But on the other hand, when you go into that conversation knowing that the worst case scenario isn't that bad, and that you can trust in your own skills to get out of the conversation. So let's say hypothetically, you're my neighbor and I come to you, I'm a financial advisor, and I say to you, Kevin, I've always wanted to have this conversation with you. I'd love to work with you. Would you be open to a conversation? Let's say that you're like, no, or whatever your way.
You're trying to think about the worst possible scenario.
Or you just are like, you get a little awkward and squirmy.
Can I tell you a real world scenario here? So I had a coaching client who approached someone that he knew socially about business, and she just went blank. She said nothing. She just stared at him. He gave her hey, I'd love to sit down with you, blah, blah, blah. And she just stared at him blankly. And I said, Dan, that's probably the worst case scenario. He said, I didn't know what to do. He's like, so I just changed the subject.
Yeah, I think that's what you did.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's it. And whether or not most people are going to respond, but even if they respond with a negative, you still change the subject.
Right.
Like, we're beyond the days of trying to overcome those objections.
Agreed.
Right. So, yeah, hey, you watching the game this weekend?
Yeah,
exactly. Going out for a ride next.
He said, I literally sat there and I thought, did she not hear me? Should I repeat myself? But
you just said it louder. Would you like to get together? And she's like, oh boy.
But in general, like, that's probably one of the worst case scenarios. Most likely, you're either going to get a yes or I'll get back to you, which could end up being a no in some way. But still, you're not going to get someone who laughs in your face. So we have to kind of get over that, right? We can't think about or dwell about these worst case scenarios.
Yeah, because guess what? Some of them are going to happen. It's not that big of a deal.
Right.
We'll move on. So when you think about like what situations are perfect for this, like if you were brand new in the business, you would have probably started with a natural network. You'd probably put these people on paper, and we're going to go after them. Well, a lot of people get out of that habit over time. And we would recommend that we always have a living, breathing list of people that you'd like to approach at some point in the near future.
We call it an approach list.
Very creatively named.
Yeah.
But these are a list of people that, for one reason or another, you think they would make a good client. And you want to have that conversation with them.
Right.
So what do? You put them on your drip newsletter? No. You have a conversation with them. And the question to me is not if or whether or not that conversation should happen. It is, what's the most natural way for that to happen?
Right. And yes, I love that. And there's different ways to go about approaching it. One of my personal favorite ones is using relatable stories. So this approach would be, I'm sitting down with Steven, who's a good friend of mine, a business owner in the community, and I'd love to talk business, but nothing comes up. So I would start sharing with Steven, like almost like in a way I'm venting or just sharing what I'm doing on my day to day. And I'd be sitting down with him and at lunch, and I'd be saying, I just met with this business owner, really interesting. We're talking about succession planning and blah, blah, blah. Like I would just start sharing some stories, and I would see kind of his response. And if he says, oh, what are you telling? Do you work with a lot of people in that scenario? Like that's when I would use that as an opportunity to kind of reel him in. But I love relatable stories. I think that's something you could start doing right now. It's like you already have a handful of stories that you have clients that have gone through a lot of different situations, experiences. Start telling other people about it anonymously, of course, right? Like, so you're not revealing, contact information but these are real stories, and you start giving people an insight into what you do on a day-to-day basis, because I would bet that a lot of them don't know fully what you do.
I agree. And I love that concept. We've talked a lot about this topic over the years, but I think one thing I took away from that was we're almost looking at this sequentially, that if you're a person who feels a little bit uncomfortable in saying to somebody, I'd like to work with you.
Right.
Then the walk before we run approach is to just let people in more often as to what you're doing.
Tell us
day to day. Like let's give ourselves permission to talk about our business a little bit more often, even including some stories.
That's good.
And so even if you had that mantra, and I don't agree with this mantra, but if you had that mantra that says people know what I do, they'll come to me if they need me,
right,
that might happen a little bit more often if we're willing to tell our stories.
I think so. And telling relatable stories. So, if I'm meeting with Steven, a business owner, I would tell a story about another business owner. If I'm meeting with someone who is recently went through a divorce, I might share a story about a client who recently went through a divorce. But it's just, it needs to feel relatable in some way.
Yeah. So first tip out of the gate today, start that approach list and let's start sharing some stories. Yeah. Now, there are other times where, and this could go for a big chunk of your list. And if you haven't made your list of people to approach yet, pause this, put it down on paper. I bet you come up with more people than you realize. But as we start to go through that list, there are some people on that list who need the polar opposite approach. Mm-hmm. They need you to be direct, right? Either based on their personality type or based on just how long you've known them, the fact that they are absolutely teed up, ready to talk with you. And for those people, we want to be more direct.
Yeah, so I like that. So if you're thinking about personality styles and we're looking at like a DISC assessment, right? So someone who's more of a D or a driver personality, we might just have to lay it out there. Put the skunk on the table, right? That's a Southern expression, but
you used it nicely. And when you're thinking about how does somebody who's got a high D personality respond? They respond well to being challenged, by people being direct with them. And they're turned off by storytelling. They're turned off by too many details.
That's true.
So if you're approaching somebody who's high in the D category, you might be
like
driver.
Steven is a D.
It's a superior personality trait.
Hey, one personality is not better than another.
Hey, Matt, for the record, Matt is far more of a D than I am. Driver. But when approaching him, your best bet would not to be get into a ton of details about how you manage money. Your best bet would be like, hey, Matt, we're probably better than your advisor. You ought to be talking to us. We ought to be working together. Because he'd be like, oh, yeah? He might not work with you, but he would respect the approach.
That's true.
Right? So, and I think, as you work through that approach list, think about the most natural way to approach people, not based on your own style. Think about this. If Matt was the financial advisor and he's got a driver personality, Would he want to go with that approach with everybody?
No.
He would do it to some people. He would approach you like that, Kevin, and you'd be like, this guy is too intense. He's too direct. I don't want that.
What I would probably do, being more of a, an SI personality styles, I would say, I'd probably be like, hey, I'd probably just put him off. Hey, I need to talk to Michelle about this.
Which is a no.
And then I would never follow up.
Right.
But absolutely, it would be a no for me but the relatable story approach for me, perfect, right?
Yeah.
And then I'll come to you. Like I will seek you out, right?
Yeah, so this is, like, so far what we're talking about are ways to approach people kind of out of thin air.
Yeah.
That if I'm going through that list and I'm thinking, Kevin, I know through, I see he and his family at the pool a lot. Next time I see him, I'm going to share a story with him. Or next time I see him, I'm just going to lay it out to him. Wait till he's had a couple drinks in him, and I'm going to say, hey, Kevin, we ought to be working together. Let's have a meeting.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's really good. So that's more of a direct style. Now, you wouldn't do that, use that approach with me if you didn't already have some relationship with me, right?
Yeah, this is for people you know fairly well,
Exactly.
right? Not best friends necessarily.
Just wanted to
but you know them
clarify
pretty
that
well.
because I don't want advisors going to different groups and say, hey, you're a driver, personality. We should be doing some business.
Yeah, but on the same token, it works. And you know what the way it works? And Matt, Matt, the way he would do it, it's just my guess. Matt's not a financial advisor, but my bet would be, having been with him on plenty of sales opportunities, that he would be direct with you, but with a smile that made it more comfortable.
That's true.
So you'd have a way of saying, hey, Kevin, we've never worked together. We ought to have a meeting.
Yeah.
And even worst case, you might say no, or let me check with Michelle, but you wouldn't be like, I'm never going to talk to that guy again.
Right.
Right? Because he's friendly.
That's true.
There's a way to be direct but friendly. I'm still working on that.
Yeah. So, okay, I like that. So relatable stories, just a direct approach, right? Another approach is something that we coach to, and it's called a redirect. We use an ARM dialogue model to describe this. When I say ARM, A-R-M, and how it works, this is a little bit more nuanced. It takes a little bit of training and practice, I think, to get this skill down. But the idea is this, right? I'm out socially. I know Steven. Steven, let's say, always asks me a question about the markets, the economy, a particular stock. What do you think about crypto? What do you think about this? Blah, 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 right? And I could take that question from him, and if I use that ARM dialogue model, I can turn it into an opportunity for myself by doing that. And again, it's really effective because from his perspective, he should feel like he solicited the conversation, right? But what do we do instead, like in those conversations, right? When someone says, hey, what's going on with the markets right now? Or, gosh, did you see this correction? What do you think about this? Like, what do we typically do?
I think oftentimes when you're posed a question about something you're really knowledgeable about, you tend to go on at too much length.
Yeah.
Like, think if somebody were to ask us about financial advisors or coaching or social media, what's new in Facebook, the tendency would be like, well, here's the,
Let me talk to you about
it's hard not to,
budget
right?
optimization.
Yeah, it's hard
right?
not to. But I think the right tactic is to think in advance about all this, that in advance you're thinking, this is the setup for an opportunity.
Right.
So going forward, I'm going to work harder at being able to convert that conversation from being on this really broad topic to something that might be more productive for me. So it might start with, generally, here's what we're seeing in the markets. Couple of sentences, nothing more.
And that would be in our model, the A.
Yeah.
We acknowledge what they're saying.
Yeah, the redirect would be shifting gears a little bit, talking about how this is affecting our clients.
Right.
Hey, here's what we're doing with our clients.
Yeah.
And then the hardest part is the mini close, the M, where I'm saying to the other person, yeah, maybe we should be working together. Are you open to a conversation?
Exactly. Yeah, a little bit of a mini close. Yeah. And we say mini close, we use that term quite often. We just, sales is a series of small closes, right? So the close could be to get them out for a cup of coffee, right? Just to chat a little bit more about their specific situation.
Yeah, so think about this, for example. Let's say we're at the pool. I've identified Kevin as my prospect. I'm the advisor, and I want to reel him in. If I take too big of a step, even if he's somewhat agreeable to meeting with me, I'm going to have some people who don't want to take a large step with me. So, for example, if I went to him and I said, hey, I want to have you into the office next week. Gather up. I'm going to send you a list of the information to gather up. That might be enough of a hurdle for him not to come in.
Oh, yeah, it would be. Without a doubt, right? We're having somewhat of a casual conversation, and then all of a sudden you're turning it into this like discovery meeting, right?
Yeah, discovery meeting. Let's loop in your accountant on this. Whereas instead, I might try to keep it as small of a close as possible. So I might say, would you be open to me giving you a call next week, and let's talk through at least initially what we may be able to do.
Yeah, and that would be a mini close.
The next step may be a video call or an in-person meeting, taking it a step further. But the way we, take little baby steps, we get more people willing to commit to them.
So with that approach, with this redirect approach, we acknowledge what they're saying, we redirect the conversation to what we're doing with our clients, and then we go for some sort of mini close at the end. Hey, love to grab a cup of coffee with you and talk about what's important to you and Heidi right now, like what you guys are thinking. The other question we love for a mini close is, can I make a suggestion? And sometimes we coach to this. So we're chatting, we're having a good conversation about whatever Stephen wants to talk about, and then I say, can I make a suggestion? And then most of the time Stephen's going to say, Sure, yeah. I mean, very rarely you're going to get someone who says, depends upon what the suggestion
If you know somebody really well, they know what you're up to, and they're like, what's this? You want me to help you move something?
So
or
like,
what?
I love it because it's an easy response question. You're going to say, yeah, sure. Why don't we get together next week? Let's grab a cup of coffee are you free on Tuesday? Let's chat more about it. That's it. Like, I would go for an assumptive close at that point. After he says, I get that agreement from him that, yeah, can I make a suggestion? Sure, let's do this, right? I don't say, do you want to do that? I don't ask another question. I say, let's meet up next week.
I think sometimes and I know that we've talked often about the power of questions. I think we can also blow it sometimes with questions. Because I'm just thinking through some of the dialogue that we often hear when we practice this and role play it with financial advisors. And oftentimes they feel more comfortable instead of saying to them, would you be open to having a conversation with us just over a cup of coffee, or would you be open to a phone call and let's talk further about this? Can I share with you what I do professionally? Like, those are quick closed-ended questions that get what we're after. We want commitment on a meeting. We can also blow it by asking questions like, what is it that your current financial advisor is telling you?
Right.
How, if you could change one thing about your current advisor, what would that be?
Oh, I was just thinking about that question because I've gotten that one.
And I get the logic. I hear that from people, and they're like, well, we want them to open up and talk to us more about it. But I'm like, at the same time, we don't want to go down this circular path here. We want this to end up in an opportunity. And if you start
some of those questions are hokey, though, I think.
Yeah, to me, like, I think of worst case scenarios with the stuff that we're teaching today that is very direct and simple. I ask you if you would like to have a meeting with me. If you say no, I can get out of that gracefully. I can change the subject. I can whatever. If I come at you with this contrived set of questions about what you value in life, about things you could change about your financial advisor,
especially early on in the process.
Oh, yeah. All those questions can be fine down the road.
Yes.
But initially when I'm selling to you, not only can I not get the opportunity, I can make you think differently of me going forward.
True.
I can say, for me, this is a pet peeve of mine, so forgive me for the tangent for a moment, but when people start asking me contrived questions about things that I know they've pre-planned, that they don't really care about the answer, that they're trying to sell to me, it drives me insane, and I won't talk to them. I don't mean to be that cold about it. Not like if it was a good friend of mine, I wouldn't talk to him again, but if somebody comes at me with like, so Stephen, if there was one thing that you'd need help on with your business, or something that feels super contrived, I can't handle it.
I know what you're talking about. So if you just Google, best networking questions.
Oh yeah,
you're going to run into just a ton of these.
A perfect list of things you should never say.
Yes, I agree. It is going to be questions like, so what's the one thing you're focused on in your business right now? It is absolutely going to be that kind of garbage. Or like, so tell me, outside of work, what do you enjoy doing? It's like, just, I don't know. I don't like those questions. They're not natural, and people can feel that they are memorized, and I don't know. It just defeats the purpose.
It does. So as you're kind of thinking about the recipe that we're talking about today, it's 99% being a normal human being in the community.
Ooh, that's good.
A friendly, nice person, 99% of it. And then 1% of the time, we're saying, be courageous enough to tell somebody you'd like to work with them.
Yeah, to ask that one question, or to go for that mini close, right?
Yeah.
I like that, 99%. So just focus on being a normal human
That's
being.
harder for some people than others, mind you. I mean,
well, especially when there's a lot of sales training too, that would be, here's the question you ask, here's the next question you ask, here's this, and then now you go for a close. Or when we were talking about like how many interactions until you can approach someone, it's like how many licks until you're at the bottom of the Tootsie Pop. Do you remember those commercials?
Yeah, I didn't know you'd weave that in today.
I didn't know I would.
But yeah, if you think about some of the people, Kevin, that we've encountered who are really good at social prospecting, they're people who are super involved in the community in really genuine ways.
Yep.
Through their kids, through charitable organizations that they're passionate about, through exercise, stuff they really like doing. And they had the ability 1% of the time to say, hey, I'd like to work with you. Are you open to it?
Yeah. I would say, let's talk about this. Okay, so we talked about different approaches. We talked about the mindset. How do we get out of these conversations if they don't go the way that we want them to go? So we're in a scenario and they said, oh, no, I'm working with so-and-so and they do a great job for us. I appreciate it, but I'm good. Like, what makes it salesy? Like what, and what we see sometimes is that people just don't take no for an answer.
Yeah, I mean, let's go back to, Kevin, some of your dating days, because I know there was like a fair amount of rejection.
I was, we're drawing parallels here. I was the one who said, like, they'll come to me. Like they'll come to me when the timing is right.
So when someone said not into you, what was your best way to overcome? But there is a lot of parallel, not to Kevin, but just in general.
Yeah.
There's a lot of parallel there between having a confident, direct approach and being able to leave things on good footing, even if the answer is no.
Yeah.
Right? So if I ask you if you want to do some business with me and you're like, nah, not really, or I get the sense that you're kind of saying no.
Yeah.
I mean, saying I need to check with my spouse is pretty much a no.
Or like I'm washing my hair, or like I got something going on.
Or if I'm like, yeah, Kevin, are you open to that? And you say, no, I want to get out of that as quick as humanly possible.
Right.
I want to talk about something else. Our kids, our
I agree.
weekend.
Yeah.
It's not that hard, right? So think about it this way, like ripping off a Band-Aid. If you're approaching somebody that you like to do business with, we want to get into and out of that conversation as quick as humanly possible. Mm-hmm. And we are the ones. The salesperson is the one who has the power to make it awkward.
Yeah.
So if I build up, if I see you in the neighborhood and I'm like, Kevin, hey, good to see you. We've lived beside you for, 11 years now. And I think a lot about you and Michelle and the family here you're raising, and I don't want this to be weird, but I was wondering.
I've already made
it weird. He's already backing away.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're spot on there, and also the person who combats it, like so let's say that I say, yo, you know what, I've been working with so and so for a long time, blah blah blah, and then you come back and you start saying, well, what all are they doing for you? Have they done this for you? Have they done, like, it's like you're challenging me. When we did research on the affluent, on what makes someone come across as salesy, it was aggressive follow-up. So in that example too, you'd be calling me a week later and saying, hey, by the way, like you put me on your drip list, like I am a prospect in your mind, and at that point I just want to avoid you. Like I'm trying to, I see you at the pool and I'm like, oh gosh, there's Steven.
There he is. Yeah,
exactly. It's true though.
It is.
So not taking no for an answer would be one. So being able to like go in and know how you're going to get out. And if someone says, I'm working with someone and I think they do a really good job and we're really happy, one, we like to ask, well, who do you work with? Right? Get a little bit of intel there. By the way, that can be super telling. Like you never know what their response is going to be there, and sometimes they can't even think of the advisor's name. But then the other one is to say like, hey, that's great. Like I think everyone should have a good financial advisor. If anything ever changes, I'm happy to be a resource for you, or something like that.
So coming into that, you pre-planned the approach and you pre-planned the exit.
Yes.
And the exit on two channels, right? If the exit is they were willing to have a meeting with us, let's schedule it.
Yeah.
If the answer is no, let's get out of it quickly, the same way we got in.
I like that. Yeah, and it gives you more confidence going in if you know how you're going to get out, right? Like, because I think that's part of some of the anxiety here is like, I don't know what's going to happen. And if you know that they're going to give you a no, then you know what you're going to say and change the subject, that's fine. I think the other thing that advisors do sometimes is now that person that I was prospecting is dead to me. Like I was at the club and I had my eyes on this person and I finally got the guts and I approached them and they said, hey, I'm good. I'm not really interested right now. And now I don't talk to them anymore.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. They're of no importance to me, which is a huge mistake.
Yeah. Again, you want to be 99% a normal person.
Yeah.
And that's not what a normal person would do.
Yeah, but something might change in that person's life too. I've heard you say this before, Steven, that second place isn't a bad thing in these scenarios, right? Get a lot of second places going because you never know when their advisor might retire or change firms, right? Or get out of the business, and then all of a sudden, you sitting over there in second place, Ricky Bobby.
Yeah, the opposite of the Ricky Bobby.
Yeah, that's the opposite of Ricky Bobby.
If you're in second,
I use that wrong, but I was just thinking Ricky Bobby when I hear second place.
If you're not first or last.
Yeah, that's it.
But we're
saying, hey, Ricky Bobby, man, it's okay being second.
Yeah, hey, you rack up a lot of points. No, but I do think as you're interpreting today, and you're thinking about taking action on what we're talking about here, there is only one measurable. And that is, do you work up the courage to approach people that you know socially, or don't you? And if we were coaching you, shameless plug, we know the difference between opportunities falling in your lap occasionally, an upgrade of a client, somebody approaching you about doing business versus you being proactive and asking for the order. Because we hear people report in on that. Oh, we had some good opportunities this week. It's like, oh, what happened? Well, this client decided to upgrade. Well, that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah,
we're
or someone sent us a referral and we did nothing to encourage that referral. It just happened, right? Fell in our lap. So you're talking about the number of approaches, right? We wrote an article. This is probably like 4 or 5 years ago at this point now for wealthmanagement.com, and it was entitled The Most Important Metric You Could Track This Year. And it was exactly what you're talking about, right? It's how many times per month am I asking someone to discuss business with me? And I'm not doing the easy way out here. So the easy way out is hey, Steven, you ever want someone to take a look at your situation? Let me know. You've heard that one before, right?
Tons. Never works.
Never works, right? It's like, hey, you want to go to lunch? Let me know.
All right. Sure thing.
We're not going to lunch.
We ought to get together sometime. Yeah, we should.
So it's like the number of times I'm actually saying, I want to sit down with you and have a conversation.
Yeah, it's very hard, but very rewarding.
Yep.
Stay tuned, everybody. We're on a roll here. We're going to keep producing shows. We've got episode number 100 looming here.
Yeah, when we started this, I remember, you can go back and watch some of these older shows. I said something like, how many are we going to try to get to? And I said, we're going to try to get to 100. And you were like, that's a lot. And we're almost there.
It's only taken a little bit of time to get there.
That's true. That is true.
Anyway, we're having fun with it. Thanks, everybody, for joining.